Hey guys, welcome back to Platinum Off-Road. We thank you for joining us for the first install video where we focused on putting on the pillar brackets of the Hammerhead windshield system kit. We did notice that everything had a nice flawless install. A lot of things fit right into place. We did thank Hammerhead so much for that install ability, and now we're going to focus on the lighting of that. Now the Hammerhead system does not come with any type of crossover for auxiliary lighting. They're expecting you to either put in a 50-inch light bar or go ahead and select a third-party bracket that you can use to mount small individual lights if you'd like to do so. Client and I, we found the Rough Country adapter bracket, as it's called. It's not specific to the JK, JL, or even the TJ series. It is a simple 50-inch adapter bracket, just like the name says. So within this, you can go ahead and you can put 4 auxiliary lights, and they've already got center holes drilled within it. On the back side of it, they've got a double hole drill behind each light that you can run that wiring over and run a nice small zip tie through for a clean finish out when the install is completed. So to get started with it, we talked a little bit about utilizing the rigid wiring harness that came with each light. Let's go ahead and get your female ends of that connector and plug it in to each of the male ends. Next, you're going to want to unroll each harness and line each harness up in such a way that you can keep it clean and bundled together. We're going to pull that harness out as far as you can to the switch wire. Well, if you don't have the rigid harness or you're using a different light, just go ahead and leave enough that you can cross down from the passenger pillar and head down up towards the headlights as you go through the cowl area. So leave yourself about 6 to 8 feet to be safe and go ahead and cut your wiring there. We're going to bundle those up and move them over. However, if you notice, we do have some exposed wire here, the insulator at least. It doesn't look like it's a nice clean finish out. So what we're going to do is we're going to use 1/4-inch heat shrink to slide up each individual line, and we're going to heat shrink that down to give it a nice clean finish, really close to what Rigid provides on the light side of it. For the rest of that harness, the fuse link side and the switch side, you can go ahead and toss all that or use it for another project. Alright guys, so we finally now have the wiring all figured out. What we went ahead and did is we took everything, like I said, over to the passenger side. We went and we put each wire in through, used the double holes with the zip ties over through it. We did put a final wiring loom over the outer of all the wires to give a nice clean finish. Now because we are using a multi-light system, it got a little thick through the way, but that's just, the price that comes with it when you're using these multi-light systems. We did, however, use a nice heat shrink to help close up the connectors and such. It's a good option to go with. The key to any of this is no matter which way you do it, you want to do it right. So make sure you have proper wiring gauge. You can use a current gauge wiring chart and calculate your current that's going to be drawn through the wire and the lengths to get the proper gauge. And then once you get that, just make sure all your connections are going to be heat shrunk or weatherproofing in some form or fashion, so that way you won't have to deal with any corrosion to later cause resistance in the line, heat, and then eventually burning up the line. So no matter which way you do it, just make sure it's nice and clean and it's ready to go down into a single loom down through the passenger pillar. We did leave a lot of extra length. I guarantee we're going to be cutting a lot of this off, and that's perfectly fine. So we're going to go ahead and get it mounted up to the Hammerhead brackets, and we'll do the next clip where we can see it all come together, and then we'll go ahead and we'll touch down through the cowl, heading up towards the battery and those auxiliary wires that are provided by Jeep. Brought you inside the JL here, and what we have is we're going to focus on how we can get, if you've got the pre-installed factory auxiliary switches, how we can get those moved over to where we can activate them, whether you want them with the ignition on or if you'd like to have them with the battery full-time power. So to do that, we're going to go into, on the main LCD touchscreen here, we're going to go ahead and go to the apps section. Go ahead and find the settings section, and then scroll down and you're going to find the auxiliary switches. And it wants a key in the on mode, so let's go ahead and take this over to run or on mode. There we go. Now here you're going to see each of those 4 switches. And what we're going to do is you're going to be able to come in here and see the individual switch, select it. And what this latching means is the latching is similar to an actual typical switch that you would switch on. It remains on until you switch it off. Otherwise, it would be a momentary switch, similar to like a spring back switch that you would press, and then immediately after release it would come back off. And if we look down at the power source, you can have it set where you can set it for ignition, meaning the ignition has to be on for this circuit to work, or you can set it over to the battery circuit, so that way the switch will work whether the ignition is on or off. So if you'd like to use maybe a light bar that's lighting up a field, or if you're doing some activity outdoors at night and you want it to run without having to have your ignition on the entire time, you can set it up that way, or just some accent lighting if you're hanging out at a Jeep meet parking lot trying to show off your cool lights and whatnot. So that's kind of how you do that. Real simple. Once you're done, just go ahead. You can either back out, close out, and you're done with that phase. If you do not have these, however, you can get these switches online. I believe Quadratec's a pretty good location to find them. Browsing around the internet, you'll definitely find them pretty easily. They're readily available out there now, so go ahead and grab you a set. It's a pretty easy install to get those in if your trim package model doesn't already come with it. As we come back under the hood, what we're going to see is we're going to find over here between the battery and the actual fender itself, you're going to find is an auxiliary relay that's preset into this switch housing, and it's going to be going to those auxiliary switches. You're going to pull back. This is just taped under here. You're going to undo the tape. You can cut it. I would suggest just unwrapping it. It wasn't that hard. And you're going to pull that back. You're going to roll back the actual tape that bundles the wires together. It's a real easy tape to get through. You shouldn't need to cut or anything and run a risk of damaging any of the wire insulator. So you're going to look at the 4 wires here. You've got 2 small and 2 large. The 2 larger wires are rated for a 40 amp circuit, and the 2 smaller wires are rated for a 15 amp circuit. So how you know whether you need to use the 40 or the 15 is real simple. You need to take your total wattage that your lights combined will be using on that circuit, and you need to divide it by 12 volts. Once you do the math, you will then get how many amps are going to be drawing through that. You always want to make sure that you're no more than 80% of the amperage that'll be needed for that circuit. So if you're a little under 15 amps, well, then you know that you can use these smaller wires. If you're larger than that and you're hanging out somewhere in the upper 20s for some of the windshield lighting systems, the upper 20s or low 30s, then you need to go ahead and move yourself over to one of the larger wires, being the 40 amp circuits. So this is where you'll access those. That's how you'll know that you need to use the 15 amp or the 40 amp. The 40 amp are programmed onto your auxiliary 1 and 2 switches. The 15 amps are programmed to your auxiliary 3 and 4 switches. So that'll kind of help give you an idea of whether you want to locate some of the lights, maybe accent lighting that you can use, or low wattage, maybe a couple pods you can use on your auxiliary 3 and 4. And your heavier items, you'll be working off some of your on-air systems, things like that, or even, like I said, the windshield lighting systems. You'll want to move them over to switches auxiliary 1 and 2. Thank you guys for joining us on this video. We hope that your install goes well. We hope that you guys were able to see a few things and pointers that were able to be helpful looking into the install for yourself. A few tips and thoughts that we had to give you guys is the fact that as we did drop the wiring over down to the passenger side, you're going to find that it's a little tight fit coming in through the main cowl over there. So to get around that, you can go ahead and loosen up these bracket bolts and be able to pull out just enough. It's good to have an extra set of hands if you can, and that way it'll allow you a little bit of room to pull up on that cowl and send your wires through. If you're working with multiple wires that you know before you hit that auxiliary line on the next to the battery, if you know you're going to end up dropping down to a single wire as you make that connection, it might be wise to go ahead and make that drop down from your multi-wire down to your single wire. Make that connection before you come through the cowl over there behind the bracket. That'll definitely help access that port just behind the main cowl. So again, overall it was a great fitment. One issue that we had was these brackets were pulled back quite a bit from the initial install, As we put in the adapter bracket, it's a 50.5-inch true measurement. That's the same measurement that you'll have with the 50-inch light bar. The outer mount points will always measure 50.5. Before we bolted it up, we did notice it had a substantial gap. It actually measured 52.5, which was kind of alarming to us. You might see that yourself if you're doing this install. However, there was a large gap here on the side of each of the windshield frame and the bracket itself until we pulled that in. Once we pulled it in and we made that mount happen, then we were able to see that the fitment of this mount against the frame was a lot better and definitely had a much better appeal. So, hope everything goes well for you. I hope this video was helpful. If you could, just give us a subscribe and stay tuned for future videos as we help you get your JL and other Jeeps off to a great start. So there's a funny story here that I'm sure we're all going to be able to laugh about here in the next couple weeks. And that is the fact that these lights are in fact like a purple black light tone. Don't really know how to explain that, but we will definitely be working with Rigid. They apparently at one point, the lights that we'd initially ordered, which were supposed to be the white, they were in stock with our vendor, and then all of a sudden they were not in stock, and this was only a matter of just a couple days worth of time. Found it a little weird, but I guess it'll make for a good story later on. The Joy will be calling the client tomorrow and letting him know that he's got party lights on top of his Jeep.